You're listening to a Bored to Death Solocast, where one member of our clan talks TV shows and movies in easily digestible chunks.
Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, and other sort of gender designations. Welcome to the Bored to Death Solocast. One person talks TV shows and movies in easily digestible chunks. I'm Chris, and I'm back with Star Trek Discovery, this Season 3, Episode 6, Scavengers. So, where we last left off with the Discovery crew, they finally managed to find Starfleet headquarters through the help of Adira Tall's symbiont with the Admiral Tall that's inside of her with the all the information that he has on terms of where the location is. So they find it, they get there, Saru and Michael Burnham meet with Admiral Vance, who is really curious as to why this ship from the 2250s suddenly shows up 930 years later, not looking aged. So they tell him the whole story about Control, the Red Angel, the battle with Section 31, and Michael sending the Red Angel suit back in time to send the final signal back to Spock. And they also find out that this new alien species, well, new to them anyways, is sick because they apparently ate these radioactive plants from this planet that the Federation actually deemed uninhabitable. It was habitable at one point in time. It was an industrial planet. It's no longer habitable. So they go out to a Federation seed ship, if I've heard that correctly, called the USS Tikov, which has the species that Discovery's chief security officer is a part of, who, after they get the seeds, chooses to stay on board to help help the scientist out that's on board, who ended up losing his family, and said that she wants to go back with him to their home planet so that way they can have a proper burial and all that. She's still technically with Starfleet. She just left the crew to go help him out, and I imagine she'll hopefully be back at some point in time. And Philippa Georgiou finds out that the Terran Empire fell apart 500 years ago and looks a little visibly upset over that. And she finds this out through David Cronenberg. And she apparently does not appreciate the fact that the empire that she was once a part of is now essentially gone now. And if you know the history with the Terran Empire through the past episodes of Star Trek, like in Deep Space Nine and all that, you understand the reasons why they fell apart was basically because of Mirror Universe Spock learning through Prime Universe Kirk, like, alternative ways, which is what weakened the Terran Empire. So anyways, this episode, Scavengers, Book comes back, and apparently Burnham and Georgiou go on a rogue mission to find him. He sends his ship, based on the trailer that they showed us, he sends his ship to Starfleet headquarters to send a message to Michael Burnham, the Discovery crew, saying, hey, I'm in trouble, I need some help. So those two go to find him. Meanwhile, Saru is trying to pick up pieces with Admiral Vance, and Stamets apparently forms an unexpected bond with Adira. I'm kind of curious about that. And another thing is that apparently Discovery herself is going to be retrofitted with 32nd century Starfleet technology. So I'm really curious as to what she is going to look like after she gets this retrofit with all this brand spanking new technology. So anyways, I will be right back after the binge.
While the binge is happening, Thanks for listening to our podcast. Please give us a like and subscribe and spread the word. You can reach us on social media on Facebook or Twitter at BTD_Bingecast. The Bored to Death Clan is part of the CKCC Radio podcast family, including J Bunny's Music Hub, the Race Nerd Podcast, Real Paranormal Talk, Ranking Tracks, Motivational Moves, Girls Who Like, and The Nerd Table. Please consider supporting CKCC Radio on Patreon. And now, the binge is done, so let's get to the discussion.
Okay, and I'm back after watching Scavengers, the 6th episode of Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery, where it turns out it kind of goes into a little more detail as to what essentially happened during the year that Michael had spent with Book, where it turns out something that she was looking for were Starship black boxes, and she has apparently gotten 2 of them. Book, after he left in the previous episode that we had seen him in, went searching for a 3rd one, because these black boxes essentially will help explain more as to what happened with the burn, where they believe that when these ships exploded, it wasn't simultaneously, like it wasn't all at the same time. It was more like one exploded, then another one exploded, then a 3rd, 4th, 5th, etc., etc., etc. So that's essentially what these black boxes contain, is the information about what happened on that particular day. So anyway, this episode starts off with Discovery getting the retrofit, and a part of the retrofit was, and apparently this is something that starships are doing now in the 32nd century, is their nacelles are no longer attached to their ships, which apparently allows for better maneuverability, which we haven't seen yet. So we see Discovery, the nacelles are being detached, but in the same way they're still a part of the ship, and the computer systems, in terms of, let's say, the bridge, everything still looks the same, but now it's essentially the same type of technology, like nanotechnology, I guess I could call it, that we see on Book's ship, where everything reacts to touch. Like, you put your hands near it, and it looks like the console essentially reacts to to your hands, and it apparently makes everything essentially easier. And the reason why they left everything looking the same is because it was to make things easier for the crew. Another change that they made was they gave them all new comm badges, and these comm badges are more than just comm badges now. They are communicators, which we saw everything, in terms of them being communicators from Next Generation all the way up to Voyager. And they are also now tricorders, and they are also the transporter system now, which is a running gag through this episode with the character Linus, where every time he pops up, it's always in an area where he's not trying to go to. Like when we first see him, he pops up on the bridge and says, "Oh, this isn't the mess hall," taps twice, transports away. And then we see him again in engineering, and he's like, "Oh, this isn't the science hall," and looks over at everybody and says, "Sorry, new comm badge." Does it again. And then he pops up again in a turbo lift later, and says, "This isn't where I'm supposed to be at." Taps it again, boom, leaves. So it's a little bit of a running gag of a old crew trying to get used to new technology. So during the episode, the scene on the bridge where they're looking at all this brand spanking new technology, Book's ship shows up, and they get a message well, first, on the view screen, we see Grudge Books, overly enlarged cat, and there's a message saying, or it's from Book from 3 weeks ago, basically saying, hey, this is my current situation. I'm going to be on this scavenger world that is run by, it's a new version, I guess, of the Orion Syndicate, where it's Orions and Andorians essentially working together. I imagine that after the burn happened, Andoria pulled out of the Federation and at some point in time joined up with the Orion Syndicate. So now they're working together. Now, like any other group or whatever, there are obviously going to be members of that particular society who do not agree with this, which we do see in this episode. So once Michael sees this message, she ends up talking to Philippa about this and says, I need to go and rescue him. Giorgio says, oh, well, this is clearly going to be an unsanctioned mission because Saru is essentially trying to prove to Admiral Vance that they can be trusted. They can be sent on away missions and whatever for this new version of Starfleet. Now, they take his ship and essentially sneak away to go and find out where he's at, where it turns out they use Grudge's collar, because there's something in the collar that can be used to trace back to him. And when they trace back to him, he's on this scavenger world, which, I'm not going to lie, the way it looks like something out of the original series, on one of those like industrial planets that we saw so many times in that show. And so we see like a mix of races there. Like we see a Bajoran there, we see obviously humans, and we see a Andorian who is the one who doesn't agree with what his people are doing, and obviously joining up with the Orions. And we see him attaching something to the back of someone's neck, and as he's doing this, he says, look, I really don't want to do this, but I'm being forced to do it. So he attaches it, and the guy that he's doing it to calls him a traitor, walks away. And then we see Book, who is working with a Bajoran, and the Bajoran ends up dropping these pipes that they're carrying. So he turns around and says, "Hey, dude, you can't be doing that. You gotta lift with your elbow." And he says, "Sorry, it's an injury that I received after I had arrived here, and it hasn't really been fixed. Like, so it healed on its own, but he never got medical treatment for it." And the Andorian he tries to give him something for it, and he says, "Oh, I don't want anything from you, traitor." Now, the one thing that you'll probably notice about this particular Andorian is the fact that his antennas are gone. The last time we saw an Andorian with a missing antenna was Shran in Star Trek Enterprise, where we find out Andorians, if their antennas are cut off, they can just grow them back over a period of time, so they do regenerate on their own. But I don't know, I can't remember exactly if anything actually happens to an Andorian if their antenna is cut off, like if it, I don't know, throws them off balance or something. I'm thinking the Tick, in the one episode of the cartoon where his antennas get removed and he loses his balance. Like, he can't walk straight, he can't really stand up straight, he just gets clumsy. So I don't remember if anything like that happens with Andorians, if their antennas are cut off. And so this Bajoran goes over and tries to steal a water supply that they have that are supposed to, or not a water supply, a water ration, excuse me. Essentially like a little itty bitty like water bottle or whatever. He takes it, tucks it under his sleeve. Unfortunately, one of the guards sees him, and obviously he gets in trouble for it. And meanwhile, Giorgio and Michael had shown up to the planet, and they couldn't scan the planet because of the force fields that were surrounding the industrial areas. So they end up getting a transmission from the surface, and it's from one of the Orions that essentially runs the place. Well, it turns out he's not the head. He's the head's nephew. And the entire time, Philippa is just talking mad smack to this guy. Like, she is just insulting him left and right. He's trying to make comebacks, but she's coming back harder. And she says, oh, well, my servant and I, and she's talking about Michael, are going to beam down to the planet because we're looking for parts or something. And, she says, we have dilithium that we can give you. And he goes, okay. So they come down to the planet, he's showing them around, and while they're looking around, she says, oh, well, do you have any 24th century self-sealing stem bolts? Which, if you remember the Deep Space Nine episode where they essentially introduced those, it turns out the self-sealing stem bolts were obsolete even by that point in time, because nobody really used them anymore. So it's kind of funny that she essentially says that she's looking for those, and meanwhile she's also being shown other junk from like the 24th century. One of them being a phaser, one of the handheld phasers. If based on the way it looked like it's the one from the Next Generation era movies. It's not from the series, because this is when the handheld phaser started to get more of like a, I guess I could say more of a darker silver look to them, or a darker gray look. And were obviously a little bit more advanced, and the handle was more curved than what it was in the Next Generation TV series. So it's probably a prop from that era, from the Next Generation films. And they also find what looked like a comm badge from maybe from Discovery's era, because it doesn't have the little oval part from Next Generation, and it's just the little Starfleet logo, or the one that we see most famously used by the Enterprise crew in the original series, and then in Next Generation, etc., etc., etc. So, anyways, meanwhile, while Book is having his little problem, that's when he notices Michael and Philippa. They had essentially gone into the area where he was at, and at this point in time is when the Bajoran was busted for stealing the water. And so the Orion comes on over to him and essentially materializes his little it's technically a hand cannon, but I'm just gonna call it this because this is how it looks. His little Mega Man Buster puts that on, shoots at the dude's feet, and tells him, okay, so he orders for the doors to be open, and he tells him, he's like, alright, so we haven't tested our new perimeter system yet, so we don't know if you're going to live or if you're going to die. And so if you live, you can keep going. If you die, well, hey, sorry, but we're going to let you test it out for us. And he goes, well, what if I don't want it? He goes, well, we're just going to shoot you. So he goes, go ahead, just go. guy takes off running, and meanwhile, he's being shot at. But obviously, the shots are missing him. Obviously, trying to get him to just keep running, because they really want to see if whether or not this new system works. So he gets to the, basically, the fence. And as he runs through the fence, his head literally pops. Like, it just, poof. Kind of like it's kind of like that scene in Suicide Squad where Slipknot had his head blown off. It was kind of like that. And that's apparently what those little devices on the back of their necks do, is if they try to cross the perimeter, the heads go pop. And he goes, alright, well, I guess it's working. And so Michael says, or she tells them that, or she tells Giorgio that she needs like another like 40 minutes. And she goes, that's all? 40 minutes? Okay, I can do that. So she starts asking this Orion, okay, I need this also. And my assistant is going to go with this guy over here in its book to look for this part. They go, okay. So Book and Michael go on over to this one little section where they hug it out. And he says, what are you doing here? And she says, I'm here to rescue you. He says, I honestly didn't really need it. But it's much appreciated. And that's when she learns that he is looking for the third black box. So he gets her the black box, and Giorgio and the Orion, they come on over. And he goes, oh, did you find what you needed? She goes, yeah, it was a little bit deeper than what I was expecting. I need time to clean and process this to make sure it's in working condition. So he says, okay. Basically says okay. Not exactly says okay. So they do that, and meanwhile on Discovery, Tilly, now mind you, nobody knows that Michael and Philippa have gone off to do this. So Admiral Vance has also told Saru that Discovery needs to be ready to jump at any moment's notice. So they can't just have them going off on random missions. It has to be on vital missions, like ones that they absolutely need Discovery for. And it turns out Adira went behind Stamets' back into the spore drive control, the room that Stamets goes and hooks himself up to it to control the spore drive. Where she says, "Oh, well, I did this for you." He goes, "Well, what did you do?" And it turns out the things that are on Stamets' forearms are no longer needed. Where he basically connects to the system that way. Instead, what it is now is more like a biomimetic gel that all he has to do is stick his hands into, and he can control it that way. And she says, yeah, there's no pain, there's no nothing, there's no residue afterwards. You know, you just stick your hands in, you take them out anytime you want to. You can just walk out. And he goes, sticks his hands in, takes them out, rubs his hands a little bit. There's no residue, no pain. He's completely comfortable. He just looks at her and goes, "Thank you for this." And Hugh also thanks Adira for this also later on in the episode. She's like, "I'm kind of glad that she did that because I was getting tired of those things on your forearms." He goes, "Yeah, me too." So another scene shows later on is Stamets goes in the mess hall and he's got his tray. Looking for a spot to sit down. He sees Adira basically looking at the wall. This is from his perspective. Looking at the wall, talking to no one. And he walks on over and he goes, "Who are you talking to?" And she goes, So I was talking to my boyfriend, who is actually dead, and he was the previous host. And Stamets says, based on my knowledge of the Trill symbiont, you are only supposed to have the memories of the previous hosts. And she says, yeah, but I'm able to talk with him. And he says, he tells her, consider me curious as to what's going on with you. So she explains the whole, I can see him, I can still interact with him like if he was physically here. And he also goes on to say, tell her the story of when Hugh had been killed in, when was it, season 2? Was it season 2? Oh no, it was season 1. Yeah, it was season 1. By Tyler. And tells her that whole story about that he had been killed, and it turned out he had been living in the mycelial network the entire time. And that's how he was brought back. So for her to interact with her dead boyfriend through the symbiont is just not weird to him. Because of the stuff that he has seen and gone through himself. So they gotta connect that way. And meanwhile, back on the planet that Philippa and Michael are on, they end up planning to escape, and they go back onto Book's ship along with the Orion and some of his people, and one of them walks on over with a box full of the dilithium that they had on Book's ship. He goes, so this is what you were keeping from us, was pure dilithium that has not been tampered with from the burn and whatever. And of course a little fight breaks out, and meanwhile Georgiou keeps getting these, I don't know if they're visions or memories from when she was still living in the mirror universe, but she is essentially standing over like a bloodied body, and whenever she gets these visions, she just freezes completely. Well, when she gets the vision this time during the fight, she collapses, and the Orion, he goes and escapes, but not before the technology that's used to let him control the fence network is actually stolen from him. So meanwhile, on the surface, Book is essentially leading a not one really kind of a raid, like a revolution. Essentially, like all the workers are rising up against the people running the place, and so a huge fight breaks out, and the fence goes down. Once the fence goes down, that's when they all make it, essentially book it towards the outside. They're all being shot at by the guards, which they're wearing like the same outfits from that first episode where Michael and Book are being chased around. So that's how you know that they're all part of this same organization called, what was it called? Emerald Chain is what it's called. Yeah, it's no longer the Orion Syndicate, it's the Emerald Chain now. They haven't really specified whether or not the Orion Syndicate still exists or not, or if this is like a 32nd century version of the Syndicate. So anyways, Michael and Philippa use the ship to actually shoot at all the guards chasing after them, and meanwhile, the Andorian, he actually gets shot. Not fatally. It's more like around like right where your shoulder meets your chest. It was like in that spot, so it wasn't really fatal. And so Book actually refuses to leave him behind, And once enough of these guards have been killed, that's when he and the Andorian take off running and get transported back onto his ship, where they leave. Now, right before they leave, Philippa... so the entire time, like, right above this facility are 3 ships that are just floating up there, and they look like really, really old Federation ships. One of the ships, which is actually the biggest one, looks like the USS Hiawatha that we see in the first episode of Season 2 of Discovery. The other one of the other ships that's there, I could tell it's Federation, but I can't really tell when it's from. It might be from 32nd century, but I'm not really sure. It doesn't really show anything other than it being shot at and crashing into the facility and literally just completely destroying this facility. So, Book's ship leaves, and meanwhile, another ship that has everybody else on board lifts off and takes off right behind them. So they get back to Discovery, where on the trip back, that's when Michael learns about Philippa's little visions, where she asks her, how long has this been going on now? She goes, about 3 weeks. And she goes, why didn't you tell me about it? And she says, I really just don't have a reason to tell anybody about this. Which might also mean that Philippa just doesn't trust anybody in terms of her telling them about these particular visions. So, they get back. Admiral Vance learns about them leaving and says, what you did was 100% unsanctioned. You had no permission to do this. We're already in, not really a war, but I guess I could say it's more of a dispute between Starfleet and the Emerald Chain, because the Emerald Chain is now moving into essentially Federation, I guess, territory, and they're trying to prevent them from doing that, but they're trying to do it diplomatically, whereas the Emerald Chain is probably just saying no, and then just shooting at Federation ships. So, Michael is essentially in major trouble with him, and he leaves Saru in charge of essentially punishing her. So Saru, who actually agrees with the Admiral, tells her, you seemed very adamant when you said you wanted to be my number one, and it turns out he has had a lot of difficulty in terms of working with Michael ever since their days on the USS Shenzhou, because she was Philippa, the Prime Universe's Philippa Georgiou, her number one officer, and that was a spot that he had wanted, and he had been hoping after Michael went on to her own command that he would be the one to replace her. That obviously never happened. And so he relieves her of her title as number one and is now strictly Chief Science Officer on Discovery, which she takes this punishment surprisingly well. And that's essentially how the episode ends right there. Oh, and she also does get a little bit of a moment with Book, and it kind of like reflects on a conversation between Michael and Georgiou earlier in the episode, where Georgiou says, "You spent a year alone with him. How do I know that the two of you didn't have a love thing going on?" She goes, "We didn't. We were just friends the entire time, trying to work together to help me solve, the mysteries of what happened in the 930 years that we were essentially gone, and what happened with the burn, and her trying to get information on that particular event." So anyway, it shows Michael and Book, after leaving sickbay and getting the Andorian medical treatment and getting those little implants removed off the back of their necks, they're in the turbo lift. He turns off the turbo lift to say, I just want to say thank you for rescuing me. And that's when they have a little bit of an intimate moment. They kiss. And then Linus shows up. And he goes, "Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to pop up here. I'm still learning this." And double taps the comm badge, leaves, and she looks at him and at Book and goes, "Sorry, it's the new comm badges." And that's basically it for right there. And that's essentially how this episode ends, is with Michael now being strictly chief science officer. So right now Discovery doesn't have a second officer, so no number one. And so the next episode, it shows that Discovery is going to actually have its first assignment outside of Starfleet headquarters. I almost called it Space Dock, but it's not Space Dock. And so that'll be kind of interesting to see how they work with this new technology from the 32nd century. And so, once again, I honestly haven't seen a weak episode this season yet. That could change. I haven't really seen any moments that kind of take me out of the show. There are the slow moments, but that's kind of expected, where you get the really exciting parts, and then you get the really slow parts afterwards to kind of sit and calm down and make you say, "Oh, that was really good," or whatever. So now I'm honestly curious as to what their Discovery's first assignment in the 32nd century is going to be. But we'll find that out till after the next episode. So, anyways, that about wraps it up. I'm Chris, and I will see you after the next episode. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Bored to Death Bingecast. Be sure to check out our library of past podcasts via CKCC Radio or via our YouTube channel, and give us a like and subscribe. We'll see you after our next binge.